Hello, everybody, as you're beginning to join. This is so exciting. So thank you, everybody, for making the time to be here this evening. I really do appreciate your involvement and your willingness to share. Thank you that you are prepared to give up your time to come and share with everybody today. So this evening, what we're going to be talking about is, should schools consider changing educational strategies? Should we actually be exploring these kinds of phenomena? And what does that mean? And all of you, I'm sure, have different views or different opinions. And to share those with everybody today is going to be super exciting. So I just want to say thank you to each of you. I'm not going to introduce you as we go along. I'm just going to say who's going to speak next. And then if you can tell people what you want people to know about yourselves, because if we did bios, we could be here all night just with bios. So if you're prepared to do that. So Francois, as Dr. Naude or super teacher, I'm not sure which you want us to call you, but Francois, if you want to begin with starting this journey around discussing educational change.
Thank you very much, Karen. It's a privilege to be with you. I actually don't care what you call me. You can call me Koos if you want to. But as long as you're a happy teacher and you are a super teacher, then I'm 100% happy with that. So my name is Francois Naude, and I have to do this. I put on the shirt for a reason. My name is Francois Naude, and I am a super teacher. And I absolutely get how arrogant that sounds. And I have to introduce myself like that every single time. And I get a lot of flack for calling myself a super teacher. But I just reckon, you know what? If I don't call myself a super teacher, and if I don't take ownership of my competence, nobody else is going to do it for me. And that's the message that I'd like to proclaim, and that I want other teachers to start embodying. I don't know, you don't have to call yourself a super teacher, but when we take that reputation of our profession and we make it our own, and we really own the fact that we are amazing and we are professionals in what we do and we are competent, just imagine what can happen with this profession. So I am the host of a web series called Super Teachers Unite, with the aim of motivating, inspiring, and supporting teachers. And boy, in the last 6 months, that's been quite a challenge. But it's amazing to see how my colleagues have taken up the fight and the amazing things that have happened. So that's in a nutshell my background, Karen. I think do you want us to jump into the prepared part, or you want everybody to introduce themselves first?
No, jump into your session. Yep.
Thank you. So if we look at the question that was posed for the session, is should schools adapt to the educational environment, and should we change? I think the question isn't really should we, but it's how are we going to? Because if we should change or not, that's not been left up to us. We had to change, and I think what's happened in the last 6 months is absolutely just emergency teaching. If we for one moment want to call it remote teaching, or we want to call it online learning, I think the message is clear that it was emergency teaching and everybody tried to cope with what was happening. But I think I almost want to start it off by making this a little like almost Star Warsy type of trailer video intro where the epic voice guy starts off by saying, "There's been an awakening." And I think that's what happened. The last 5 months or so, I think there's been this major awakening. The things we're talking about, especially in educational technology, it's not new. It's not something that just suddenly in March people started talking about, oh, now we need to go online. Now we need to start doing remote teaching. This has been part of our conversation for probably 2 decades, even not more. But it's suddenly that there's been this awakening. We've awakened to the need. And everybody, or let's say there were a bunch of early adopters that started using this very early, but now suddenly it's more mainstream. And the awakening that really happened started off, I think, with our parents. And one of the first things that they've realized is that, you know what, it's not easy being a teacher, especially if I need to teach my own kids. So that awakening, that appreciation from parents that happened. I remember all of these celebrities that suddenly posted on Twitter about how amazing teachers are, and teachers need to get paid more. And I think it's time to pay the piper. We'll have to cash in on those checks that celebrities made on Twitter very soon. The other awakening came from schools, and the fact that schools realized that, you know what, we are extremely vulnerable. Our financial situation depends on the financial situation of our parents and the economy of the country. And we've seen that schools have taken a big knock financially. And that, especially in schools where infrastructure wasn't in place, now if they suddenly had to get the infrastructure, and I'm not talking about edtech infrastructure necessarily, even just basic sanitation, and we saw the scramble from the department to get that ready. So schools awakened to the fact how vulnerable we are. And then teachers awaken to the fact how difficult it is to teach when the kids aren't in the class. This whole point that we've been asking teachers to start incorporating technology in their teaching, for those that adopted it, the transition was a bit easier. And for those who couldn't or that didn't do it earlier, they were thrown into the deep end, and they had to awaken to the reality that now we suddenly have to teach kids that aren't physically in our classroom. So as I said, the question isn't should we change, the question is how we change. And I know my esteemed colleagues who are on the panel, so I'm not going to talk about the specifics. And I thought, let me take more of a high-level approach to how we should change. And I'd much rather mention how I saw teachers and schools adapting over the last few months. On the Super Teachers Unite show, I have the privilege of interviewing many of the superheroes of education. I get to know their stories. And you know what? The teachers that really succeeded in this last while are the ones who became part of professional learning networks. These are teachers who became part of a community of practice that looked to their colleagues for assistance. It's the teachers that remained humble, that went, you know what, I don't know everything. I need to upskill myself. And they were humble enough to go and learn. I know of 65-year-old teachers that learned from teachers who are in the profession for 5 years and just went like, please assist me. And I don't think many people in general are humble enough to do that. So I saw that. And if we want to change, I think it comes down to a mindset change. Let's become more humble in knowing that we don't know everything, and adapting or adopting that growth mindset, and knowing that, you know what, I can be as experienced as I am. I could be the most experienced teacher, but I've got still a lot to learn. So those were the teachers that really prospered in the last while, as those ones that were adaptable and flexible and could learn. And we saw that within the Super Teacher Network, within the #ZAEDU community. There's a lot of amazing things that happened when teachers started looking towards them, each other, to improve. And I hope that's a trend that will continue and accelerate into the future, where the professional development, that we took that into our own hands, and that we keep up to date with the latest developments in edtech and technology, and then building relationships with our kids. And then our schools that really prospered are the schools that realized the power of community. The schools that realized, no, what, we can't be authoritarian. We can't just be giving direction to our parents and our learners and our teachers, but we need to pull in the community in our decision making. Those were the schools that it went relatively well with. And I hope to see in the future that is going to continue. And one thing that I hope for when it comes to adopting to the new environment is that schools will realize that they are an essential hub within a community, that they are, I almost want to say, the central point of bringing people together, and that network is extremely valuable. And schools no longer really have to be those people that say, you know what, I should just do things for free, or I need to ensure that we just spread the word, but that schools can actually benefit from their networks. When teachers in schools and parents in schools connect and come together and they become more closer, then the results show with the mindset and the livelihoods of our children. So one way in which I propose, and I'm very cognizant of the time for this intro, is that I would like to see schools start adapting and adopting more technologies to bring communities together. And one way of doing this, and I'd suggest schools look into it, is creating their own web series or creating their own podcasts where they start telling the stories of their community. So Karen, I'm gonna leave it at that and hand over to you, but that would be my intro. I would like to see schools.
It wasn't unmuting me. Sorry, the technology. The fun I've been having today with technology. So thanks, Francois. That was lovely. Lindsay, you were saying you've got a webinar later this evening. So if you would like to go next, that would be really cool, please.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay, and I am the Innovation Coach and Chief Edu-Imagineer of Teach.Learn.Innovate. I'm pretty sure I know a good few of you that are listening, but if I haven't had the privilege yet of meeting you, welcome, everyone. It is wonderful to share this space with you. So you might have done a double take when I said I was an Edu-Imagineer. And the reason for that is because it is a word that I've made up. So if you were a little confused there for a second, that's absolutely fine. So I call myself an Edu-Imagineer because I believe that education can and should be better, not just for our children, but also for our teachers. But I'm not just an imaginer and a dreamer and a believer. I am very much a practical, hands-on person who believes that we need to empower teachers to build and to engineer and to design learning differently. So that's a little bit about me. My company is Teach.Learn.Innovate, and we essentially exist to inspire and empower teachers and help schools bring to life their vision for future-oriented education. So I thought about how I might structure our little chat this evening because, like I said, I'm all about the engineering and how we structure things and help people understand. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Simon Sinek and his golden circle. If you've never seen the TED Talk, definitely go ahead and give that a watch. But Simon basically talks about how very often in the way that we think and the way that we analyze things and we talk about things, so in this case, education, we talk about what? So what is wrong with education? And then we go to, all right, well, how do we fix it? And then we kind of, as an afterthought or as an incidental element, we kind of consider the why. But Simon really suggests that we start with the why. So I think if we're asking ourselves, I fully agree with Francois that education absolutely does need to change. But I think if we start with asking ourselves why, that gives us a really great place to begin this conversation. So I'm not sure whether any of you have ever worked in anything other than education, but I'm pretty sure that you can quite clearly see the disjunct between our traditional school timetables and the way we operate in the real world. So where in the real world do you get a new boss, a new timetable, a new work environment, a new team, and a new project every hour? Nowhere, right? But yet our school timetables compartmentalize our subjects, they compartmentalize our time, they compartmentalize our thinking, right? So why do we need to change education? Well, because it doesn't prepare children for the real world. And if you ask anybody, why are you a teacher? I'm pretty sure somewhere in that why, they'll tell you, I want to prepare my children for the real world. I want to give them the skills that they need to survive and more so thrive in this rapidly changing world that we live in. So I'm not going to harp on about these skills because you know, and I'm sure you've heard of most of these skills for success that have been identified by the World Economic Forum and others. But I want to have a quick chat about teachers, right? Because I think part of the reason for the why we need to change and part of the why of education comes down to our self-conceptualization as teachers. So I'm not sure how many teachers on the call feel that this adequately epitomizes who you are, but this is what you get when you Google the word teacher in 2020. Totally what you guys do every day, right? Yeah, bit of a problem. So in my journey as a teacher, I've realized that one of the things that teachers have in common is a few obsessions, right? And one of the things that we're obsessed with as teachers is teaching. And we're obsessed with covering the curriculum. But when we think about this, and this is a quote that really epitomizes this for me from an American teacher called Tom Naude, who says, we can't just be satisfied with teaching. We must be obsessed with learning and why or why not the learning has happened. And I think part of the change that is needed in education is a reconceptualization of ourselves and our role as teachers. So at Teach.Learn.Innovate, we do not refer to these terms that everybody uses. We offer teachers, when we work with them, a new title, and you can let us know in the comments whether you feel like this title resonates with you. But for me, the job of a teacher is to be a learning architect, right? And if we start to think of ourselves as being learning architects, then we can start to ask the question, okay, well, how do I become a learning architect? So if I understand the why there is a need for me to change my role and for us to think what school looks like, then we can start to think about the how, right? And one of the kind of common answers that I hear is, oh, yes, well, we just need to innovate. You know, how are we going to do this? We need to be innovative. And maybe you want to share in the comments a little bit about what you define innovation to be, because I love these buzzwords that we throw around when we talk about change. But actually, my favorite definition of innovation, which I think has some merit in sharing with you, is from Jamie Notter. And he says, innovation is change that unlocks new value. And I think a lot of the time when we are thinking about the how we're going to do change in education, we're like, how are we going to do it? We're just going to change, right? We're going to get the tech and get the ebooks and import the robotics and scratch the timetable and all of these things. But I think it's really important that we consciously think about what is the new value that this change is unlocking, right? Because if we can't name the value, then it is just change and it's not innovation serving a purpose. Part of the how, which Francois mentioned, and I know we're very much on the same page when it comes to community and not doing things alone, is around connecting with other educators and around sharing stories. So when I tell teachers and schools you need to be innovative, they go, that's great, show me how. And those of you who were in Frankie's session earlier today will really understand the power of a teacher sharing his or her story as to how they tackle a particular learning objective and how they design learning. So I think that part of the thing that needs to change is that we need to stop seeing education as a competition. Because if education is a competition, no one is winning and our children are losing. And we need to start having a much more collaborative space where we share our stories of what we're doing in the classroom. I'm going to skip the change management model for now because I think it's a little bit of a meaty piece to tackle. But we do need to acknowledge that as teachers and schools, we are in a change management process and look at it critically from that perspective and seek out models to help us manage the change. And then lastly, what needs to change, right? What does it look like when education changes? So I'm a firm believer that the what happens at the intersection of technology, which has already been mentioned this evening, and great, incredible pedagogy, and of course, the very key human ingredient that only teachers can bring to the party, which is the passion and the empathy and the perspective. So one of the things that we do at Teach.Learn.Innovate is we help teachers break down the silos. So where we've got separate subjects and separate elements in timetables, we use frameworks such as inquiry-based learning. We engage children in answering of non-Googleable questions. Right. So moving beyond what children can Google, as we know now, this is with remote learning, it's become very obvious that we need to start to ask different kinds of questions and then tackle the enemy of the curriculum, right? All of the teachers that I work with are like, yes, Lindsay, that's lovely, but I have to cover the curriculum. So I think the change looks like creative ways of covering the curriculum through cross-curricular inquiry-based learning design. So rather than getting children to categorize on a boring worksheet what is healthy, what is unhealthy, designing a cross-curricular unit like, are sandwiches the superfood of the future, right? And engaging our children in cross-curricular inquiry where they are touching on content from various subjects, skills from various subjects, where it is technology infused and enriched with great pedagogy and learning design, so that we can tick all of the curriculum boxes, plus, of course, extend the learning beyond the curriculum and engage them in real world problem solving. So in a nutshell, I could talk all day about this, but I am conscious of time. Just to give you a little sneak peek into some of our workshops where we use hexagonal thinking to do this kind of cross-curricular learning design with schools and with teachers, and to let you know that it is absolutely possible to work with existing curriculum and to infuse that with incredible pedagogy, amazing technology, and actual learning journeys that get to the heart of what we want our kids to learn. So essentially, in a nutshell, what does change look like? I think change looks like asking pertinent questions about how to navigate that sweet spot in the middle of pedagogy, technology, and passion and empathy, which are the key human ingredients. So if you want to learn more about that, you're welcome to check out our webinar offering. We've got some fun future-focused Fridays on the go at the moment. And you can, of course, reach out to me on social media, and let's continue this conversation some more.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you for your passion and for your willingness always to share. Thank you for the way you put your message across, that you really inspire the teachers to actually want to engage and want to change. So thank you for sharing.
Yes,
Michelle, if you'd like to go next, please. Oh, thank you. So Michelle, if you'd like to go next and introduce yourself and then tell us about your thoughts, please.
Great. I'm just going to, hi everyone. I'm just going to share my screen and then we can get going. Thank you very much. And it's amazing to hear everyone's passion and to hear everyone sharing. And so I think I'm going to just approach my intro very differently. I'm going to start off with some observations and then just briefly go over what ThinkAhead and iSchool Africa are doing. And then really I'm looking very forward to the collaborative and participation of the audience. So I'm Michelle, and I'm a Managing Director of iSchool Africa and ThinkAhead. And I really, over the last, now it's 6 months, I think we've seen a real unprecedented uptake of tech. And I know that Francois was saying at Lindsay, it's something that the education sector has always been a slow mover of adopting technology. And in the last 6 months, I think we can all see that it's just been ridiculously, we've leapfrogged into a different space. And now we have to sit back and see, because it would be terrible if we went back to where we were. So we have to take these learnings and we have to see that it's no longer, a lot of the speakers have talked about the network and learning. And it's not just, our territories are not just anymore about our classroom or our Zooms and the virtual webinars, and everything has shown that we have to extend beyond the classroom. And I think working in the ThinkAhead space and the iSchool Africa space has really shown that we have to use the opportunity of this pandemic to move towards a more equitable education system. And Professor Jansen has said that a pandemic doesn't bring inequalities, a pandemic highlights inequalities. So I think as we review the change and the opportunity of COVID-19, I think we really need to make sure that access and quality content is available in a more equitable system for everyone. I think we also are going to see a different role of parents and also a different child that comes into our system. A child that has learned by themselves for 6 months, a child that has experienced the trauma of living during a pandemic. And we need to look at connection. The connection is key. I mean, I'm obviously come from the space of EdTech and the space of promoting, making sure that we use technology, but through that, we need to make sure technology is used, as Lindsay said, for a transformational curriculum that creates more connection. So I think in summary, I feel like this is a time to really reset and to use the cliche, this is unprecedented times. I think it is, let's really, really make the opportunity. And let's, as Francois said, let's move away from crisis remote learning. So everyone says, oh, now I've got a homeschooling solution. Oh, now I've got an online learning solution. We're all in a transition stage now. And let's take this opportunity to work towards a more authentic, relevant, and globally connected, equitable educational system. And I think Lindsay also touched on this, is what are the skills? And I think more and more, Forbes published in April, is what are the skills to succeed in a post-coronavirus world? And we've seen this as teachers and as parents and as business leaders, is we have to have adaptability and flexibility. We cannot not have tech savviness. We have to have creativity and innovation. We have to have data literacy, critical thinking, digital and coding skills. We have to have leadership and emotional intelligence and commitment to lifelong learning. And I think all the speakers preceding me have really focused on this. And I think when we relook education, how are we achieving this? And I think a good example of the child that we're teaching, I always get told I bring up my nieces and nephews, but I was watching President Ramaphosa's presentation last Saturday night, and I was watching on television, and my 5-year-old niece walked into the room and said, whispered to me, can he hear us or are we on mute? And I think that's their world. Their world is a Zoom world now. I'm like, no, this is like this is a one-way. President's talking to us. We're not on mute. So I think we really need to look at what, as we go back, are we bringing these skills in? So very briefly, I'm going to go through the different offerings ThinkAhead and iSchool Africa have. ThinkAhead has put together the different elements that will bring and support schools that go into this hybrid model. And what is that in terms of the connection, the device, the tools, the cybersecurity, the professional development. So really, and how do we make that sustainable, and how do we match that to schools' budgets and to schools' needs and to schools' infrastructures? So please chat to me or my team about what does your school need in where you are in this adjustment, in this transition stage. And then hopefully you've seen is ThinkAhead has been partnering with iStore with a teacher series that we have numerous free sessions about using the iPad and the MacBook and parenting in a COVID world. And for example, on 1st of September, we launched Deaf Awareness Month, and there we're going to be looking at accessibility. And because I think that is one thing also we need to address when we change the way we think about education, is about inclusion and accessibility. And are all these remote resources accessible for all the children, for people with learning barriers and for students with physical barriers? And then we've launched #MyFuture, which is to help give refurbished iPads and a digital learning kit to matrics who are really suffering from and being further disadvantaged by COVID. So, and there's ways for teachers to get involved by mentoring, there's ways for students to get involved, there's ways for schools to get involved. So our goal is to reach 10,000 matrics. So I would love to chat to you more about that. And then just in terms of following on from Frankie from the Macmillan talk, is just join us, our Couch to Class group on Facebook, because every day you can share different areas of your experiences in remote learning. So hopefully that gives a feel for what we are doing. But I think in terms of educational change, I encourage and I'm excited to work with everyone in taking the learnings, but working into a way of remodeling for a more equitable, relevant, inclusive and accessible educational system. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. There's some really exciting pieces that you've shared with us, and all the initiatives that you're starting and going on with how you ended in terms of how really making technology and education accessible to all. I think that's really fantastic. So thanks for sharing. Ronald, if I could ask you if you could share, introduce yourself and tell us about you and the amazing things that you're doing up there in Langebaan. So welcome.
Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Oh, you've gone again, Ronald. You've gone again.
My perspective, Karen, I will take it from the empowered teacher, because I believe that for everything that has been said and done today, the main core component of change within the education field is the teacher. And for me, I'm going to take it from a perspective of a motivated teacher and what teachers can do with low tech and some free applications and tech solutions they can use to enhance teaching and learning process within their classroom. But specifically the empowered teachers. So for me, what's important for me is that teachers need to be empowered. And when I say empowered, I mean that teachers within the classroom should be aware of the changes that's happening in the education system. Because the reality is that uh, the systems are changing, times are changing, and the type of learning you have in the classroom, they are also changing. Let me give you a simple example. So learners in our classrooms nowadays, they use TikTok to create videos. And so in essence, they are by default content creators. And they understand the elements of creating a video, different lighting, how many times to shoot a video, and all those functions and principles of creating a video. So the question we as teachers should ask ourselves is are we prepared to engage with those learners on that level and ready them for life after school? So before I continue, my name is Ronald, and I'm a teacher, and I'm teaching in Saldanha, and I've been teaching for 12 years now, and my areas of subject was mathematics and life sciences, and also technology. And I'm also the ICT champion at my school, and I'm also a tech integrator and a tech enthusiast. And I've been using ICTs to enhance my teaching and learning myself, and also the skills that enable and enhance the teaching and learning process for my learners. So for when all is said and done, it is still the teacher in the classroom that will be the person that's going to drive any change in any product from any company. So I think that is the most important aspect. So for me, tonight, I would like to encourage teachers to empower themselves, because there's a lot of opportunities for teachers to empower themselves, and the WCED has made a lot of things available for teachers to empower themselves. The WCED is now at the point where they are creating content for teachers as well. So there is a lot of things that's available freely for teachers to empower themselves. So from a teacher to a teacher, I would like to encourage teachers to take on the opportunities and empower themselves, because the reality is, if we are not going to take on these new changes in the education, and I'm referring specifically to technology changes in education, we are going to fall behind. And the other reality for teachers is that if you do not become technologically equipped, you can be guaranteed that jobs will move past you in future if you're going to move into the education sector. Because what pre-service teachers now at universities, they are being their technological knowledge domains are being developed, and the teachers currently who have not had the opportunities for those domains to develop, those teachers now have to learn on their own pace and learn at their own pace. And what COVID has now done is COVID has now pushed everybody in a corner and said, look, everybody's going to integrate technology now. So now it becomes a stress factor for teachers, and those are the inhibiting factors now that is not allowing teachers to integrate to the point where they need to. And that is something that needs to be focused on. We need to alleviate or minimize the inhibiting factors for teachers in order for teachers to integrate, because the reality is technology as a key knowledge domain or as a key component in the education sector is something that is the success of it is dependent on the teacher's level of integration. So we need to empower the teachers, but not just externally, internally as well. We as teachers also to find that intrinsic motivation to take on opportunities. Let me give you an example. WCD is creating a lot of opportunities for teachers. CTLI has recently created amazing online courses, simple courses such as using WhatsApp as a communication tool in your classroom, using the Google apps, all this stuff, using video software. So a lot of things is available for teachers now to empower themselves, and teachers absolutely, they need to seize the moment, because if they're not going to seize the moment now, that because of the rapid change of technologies, they will be left behind. And as I've mentioned earlier on, the TikTok child in your class who's already a content creator, what are you preparing that child for? Because now TikTok needs creativity. Are we teaching creativity in our classrooms? And the other reality is that yes, the curriculum is content-based, content-driven, but these other elements that everybody is talking about, these things are things that needs to be brought into the classroom, not just as an afterthought. It needs to be integrated deliberately. And I think that's a very, very important thing. So hopefully from that perspective, I can just stimulate teachers to engage on platforms. I mean, Google is offering free courses. Microsoft is offering free courses. These companies are doing a lot. They're investing a lot of money just to get teachers empowered. So my message to teachers tonight, apart from the fact that I'm going to show a presentation on some soft technology that teachers also can use in the classroom to enhance their teaching and learning, and what I have done as a teacher to create and content for learners and teachers in order to empower them as well. And I'm not doing this for money. I'm a teacher. I'm doing this free because I have a passion for it. So what I'm going to do now is I will show you my presentation on ways in which how I have tried from my side to bridge the technology gap, because I am teaching in a rural area and there's a lot of socioeconomic challenges in the rural area. So I would just like to quickly just share my screen. Can you see my presentation, Joe?
%100%.
Okay, thank you. So, slowing quickly. Okay, so these are some of the resources I've created. This is a bit.ly link. So bit.ly is also software that allows you to create personalized links. And this bit.ly / all capital letters Kock Prezi, that's my surname. And it's a Prezi, it's a presentation software. It allows you to create nice interactive presentations. And the one that I've created for you, you can check the link, has all these components in. So if, for teachers who would like to teach with videos in the classroom, these are all hyperlinked sticky notes in the presentation. And it has an introduction for you. It has the concept of thinking out of the box. I also highlight the differences of integration versus usage, and also showing you how to download videos, how to use videos in your classroom. I'm also highlighting all the important elements of using a video in the classroom, such as watching the video before you show it to learners, keeping it short and succinct. So all those elements have been included in this presentation. I've also added some of the top video channels for you and some other nice resources, and also some conclusion motivation there as well. So if you follow that link, you will be able to view the presentation. And I also have my Facebook page here for you. That's bit.ly / all capital letters. And my Facebook page, I have my collaborators. This was an initiative between me and a group of collaborators, and we have decided during the lockdown period that we are going to create online video content for grade 8 to 12. And the collaborators is Ricardo Vesey, Bridget Summery, Robin Diaken, Patrick Mettler. And these are teachers that's living in the Cape area, living in the West Coast area, and we've decided online, let's start a collaboration. And we have created this beautiful Facebook group, and we are standing at 838 members at the moment. And what we are doing with this Facebook group is we are creating content for teachers and learners. The teacher component is how we use technology in the creation of the video lessons, so that in essence the teacher can also learn from the video that is posted on the Facebook group. So that is what the Facebook group is. So then I have another nice resource for educators. And this is a beautiful presentation that I've put together. Teaching low tech. It allows you to use freely available resources. If you're struggling to understand what to use, in this presentation, I've captured a lot of things, especially screencasting, which is a major thing now because we have to capture our videos. So I've captured that in there as well for you. So all these links are links that teachers can use to assist them in the classroom, and then screencasting with the small tools. And then also, I'm also available on YouTube. I'm available on, I have a website, an educational website, and I will share that link with you, and you will be able to access my website. And my website entails all curriculum components of the grade 12 FET curriculum, and I also the Facebook page and on my Twitter handle as well. And then for if you need any assistance, here's my contact details. I do it for free. I don't get any money. I'm just here to help, and that's my passion, to help teachers so we can develop what I'm passionate about, the empowered teacher. Thank you very much for the time, Lauren, and I hope that you have a lot of questions for us.
Thanks, Frankie, for sharing. That's really cool. Hi, TC. It's over to you now. If you could share your opinions and your thoughts.
Sure. Just checking if my screen has come on. Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to kick off by introducing myself. So my name is Nkosi-Mnanzana, and I'm the Global Culture Manager at Novo Pioneer. Novo Pioneer is an education group, is a Pan-African independent school network that builds and operates world-class affordable education for students from preschool all the way through to secondary. And at present, we have 13 schools in our network, and those 13 schools can be found in both Kenya and South Africa. Specifically in Kenya, we exist in Athi River, in Eldoret, and in Tatu City. That's all in Nairobi. And in South Africa, we can be found in Omonde, in Joburg South, Midrand, Boksburg, Paulshof, North Riding, and Reimsig. So today, I have the pleasure of speaking to you all about what I would like to propose as an educational mindset shift. And that is around understanding the importance of a school culture in creating schools of excellence, right? So before I kick it off, I'm going to invite you all to just spend a minute reflecting on these two questions. So one, what do you understand the word culture to mean? And what emphasis does your school, team, or organization place on culture? If you've got the luxury of a pen and paper, please go ahead and do just some journaling around those two questions. I'm also happy to see some comments. I see the comments on the comment box are going live. So it'd be great for you to share what your understanding is, or just your quiet reflection around the school that you're based, your personal understanding of the word culture, and then, of course, what emphasis is placed at your school on culture. So 20 more seconds just to think through these two questions. All right, great. So I imagine that for a lot of people who've thought about culture, they've thought about a collection of values, of expectations, of practices that guide and inform the actions of all teammates. So that is a definition of what organizational culture is. I thought, since we're a collection of teachers here, I would define what I understand, what I thought is a really nice definition of school culture. So school culture refers to the beliefs, to the perceptions, to the relationships, the attitudes, written and unwritten rules that shape and influence every aspect of how a school functions. It also encompasses more concrete issues, such as the physical and emotional safety of our students, the orderliness of our classrooms, our public spaces, and the degree to which our school embraces diversity. And so, I'm sure you're sitting on this call either as a school teacher or a school principal and wondering, with all the deliverables that you have as a school teacher or a school principal, why would culture be so incredibly important? Well, firstly, culture exists in our spaces, whether we choose to define it or not. That's the tricky bit, right? So whether you purposefully or intentionally define the kind of culture that you want your school to operate by, it's there anyway. So why not take the time to actually invest in the kind of culture that brings about the best in your team and as well in your students? So let's talk about Novo Pioneers culture. So our culture is defined in 6 culture principles. Now, these culture principles were narrowed down from a group of 10 at some point. And I thought I'd just take a few moments just to take you through what each one means. I'm going to kick off with our first culture principle, which is joy of learning. This culture principle speaks to our ability to remain lifelong learners, to find joy in learning, and to continue to work hard in everything that we do. Second culture principle is around collaboration and understanding that when we work together as colleagues and as students, we're capable of achieving more. So there's a sense of acting as one team, as well as having a generous attribution or generosity of spirit. Thirdly, I'd like to talk about always growing. Always growing details how we at Novo Pioneer constantly seek out difficult challenges, share and receive feedback as a gift, and see failure as an opportunity to grow. Failure as an opportunity to grow is usually an interesting talking point. Servant leadership. You may have seen that our motto is that we're a school of innovators and leaders. And so it's important that our students understand that great leaders are also great servants and that they put service to others before service to self. Next, our fifth culture principle is around solutions first. And so what we've done is we've purposefully defined our school as a whinge-free community and encourage our teammates to bring solutions when they raise a problem. This means that we all take accountability for creating the kind of space that we want to live and work in. Then lastly, I want to talk about our culture principle of high expectations. So this means that as a network of schools, we believe that ourselves and our students are capable of greatness, and we do whatever it takes to constantly achieve this excellence. So, big question. Now we've got our 6 culture principles, and I'm pretty sure a lot of schools as well have got a set of values that they already live by. But what is that culture risk that exists in our schooling system? Well, just as with us at Novo Pioneer, unless if we intentionally put the work into making sure that 1, we've got the buy-in with each of our culture principles, and 2, we understand what the associated actions and behaviors are of living out these culture principles, then we do run the risk of these culture principles being things that just live up on the wall and things that we don't live by, that we don't see in our corridors, in our classrooms, and even in the homes of the children that we teach. And so, I imagine you're a school teacher, you're a school principal, you're thinking, okay, where do I even begin? First things first, you need to understand what your current school culture is. There are a lot of websites online that you can find that help you do a deep dive of your school's culture. But some of the questions that you would be asked when you're doing a deep dive into your school culture would be some of the questions I've detailed here. So firstly, how does your school recognize and award progress? Many a times we find that schools tend to award excellence and not so much progress. And often that's a very small culture shift that you can create within your staff as well as with the students that helps you start to value progress as opposed to just purely perfection or excellence. Number 2, how does your school foster collaboration and feedback? I think someone on the call mentioned now that the way in which our timetable is structured is that we work in silos. So what is your school doing to intentionally foster collaboration amongst the teachers? And how do teachers share and receive feedback? At Novo Pioneer, we say feedback is a gift, right? It's an opportunity for you to grow and to learn from your mistakes. The next thing is around how does your school ensure that teachers have got a strong work-life balance? We all know, I say this as someone who has been in the classroom for 10 years, teaching is incredibly stressful. It's one of those jobs where they say to you, if you're not tired by the end of the day, then you're not doing it right. And so what is the school doing to ensure that holidays, for example, weekends, after hours, those times are respected as being outside of working hours? And then lastly, how does your school celebrate failure, if at all? It's usually an interesting phenomenon when I speak to people about how at Novo Pioneer, we actually celebrate failure. And I know there's usually a long pause, but we do. We gather on a Friday for something we call Failure Friday. And what we do is on those calls, people detail what they think they might have failed at in that week. 1, it's not just that we come and we celebrate the fact that someone missed a deadline. We're really pushing that person to understand what led to that failure, and then also do something that we call fail forward. So not fail and stand in the same position, but fail forward and make sure that there's an accountability partner on that call with you who will ensure that you come back and report back on how you then address that failure from the week before. Okay, so I've introduced myself as a global culture manager, right? And I know that often culture is something that's usually quite difficult to define. It's a little bit intangible. So what do I personally do day to day at Novo Pioneer as the global culture manager supporting 13 schools in both South Africa and in Kenya? I thought I'd put 3 of the things that I really focus and spend my energy on. The first is around strengthening our culture roots. Now, you can imagine we're a network of 13 schools, which means every year we're opening a brand new school. The risk that we run there is that there is an opportunity for our culture, for example, to be diluted. So in my work as a global culture manager, I ensure that from an onboarding process, there's a strong understanding of those 6 culture principles that I spoke about. Not just in their definition, but what it means to live out each particular culture principle. For our onboarding, for example, we go through scenarios with our teammates where we ask them to do a deep dive into each of our culture principles and how it can manifest itself once you get into the classroom. Then I lead culture moments and bring joy to the organization. Just this morning, we had a call with about 300 teammates in South Africa where we began term 3 on a high note. We had an amazing race-themed team building, virtual team building, and needless to say, it was quite competitive. It was a lot of fun. I think you can all agree that this year, 2020, has highlighted the importance of strong connections and relationships. And so as the culture team, obviously working quite closely with the HR, at Novo Pioneer, we call it the talent team. One of the things we do is obviously to foster joy across the organization. And then lastly, I help build systems that reinforce our culture. Obviously, the intent with Novo Pioneer creating more schools is that we have to build systems that sustain each of those schools. One of the programs that we run is something called an Emerging Leader Program. It's where we train potential HODs, potential deputies and heads of schools, and preparing them for those roles. So within that, I then support how you help those potential HODs, deputies and principals lead strong culture in their teams. Okay, so imagine you have now taken stock of the culture in your school and you decide, all right, I hear you, TC, but where to from here? You've got 2 options. One, you do a culture overhaul. So you decide, I want to redefine the school culture and almost start from scratch. So that obviously involves a lot of consultation and engaging with all of your stakeholders. Or you actively work with the current culture to create a buy-in from your team and your students. Truthfully, both options are equally difficult, so I would recommend that you choose the one that best suits your school. And so, how do you know that you've intentionally invested in culture? I'm going to speak from a Novo Pioneer perspective around what the benefit of having a strong culture is. Firstly, it guides all of our interactions amongst peers, with our parents, with our students. Secondly, our culture underpins all of our teaching and learning, both on campus and off campus. And lastly, culture at Novo Pioneer is the basis of our everyday experiences, from the way in which we make decisions to the way in which we recognize our students, our team, and the way in which we start to value some of the feedback. I'm going to end off with a quote from David Cummings, who didn't say anything about school or principal. I've added that in. But he says something so powerful about culture being the only sustainable competitive advantage that is within the control of the entrepreneur. For us as teachers, it means that our school culture is within the control of the principal, I've said, but also very much in the control of the teachers who are on that property. I'm going to end with that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, TC. What a really informative discussion in terms of how Nova actually empowers their staff and actually encourages them to reflect and to grow. That's really insightful. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Omashani, it's over to you now. I'm not sure if you're muted.
Unmute myself. Yes. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
There we go. There we go. Hello.
All right. Cool.
Yes, yes,
Right.
we can hear you.
So let us chat. Okay. So I'm Omashani Naidoo. I'm the Executive Director of SchoolNet South Africa. I think the key sort of elements around many of the other panelists have been around how do you practically implement change? And I think the key sort of element that I am sort of speaking to is seeing how do we effect this change that we're wanting? And part of the issues around South Africa particularly is that we have brilliant policies around change. If you look at our e-learning policy as well, back in 2004, which was framed by Naledi Pandor, who was our previous minister. If you look at the language, if you look at, it was all very optimistic, very realistic in terms of understanding the need for digital, to understand the framework around all of those elements. But what doesn't work for us is on the ground change. And so when I say change is good and you go first, it means that we are at the heart of change. And if we're wanting to see any change on the ground and to see the wheels turning, then we ourselves need to start that change process. Just some brief history for those of you that are not familiar with SchoolNet. We've been around for over 23 years. Part of the work that we are involved in is to align ourselves with the policy statements so that we know that all of the work that we're doing sort of work toward and align with national programs that fit and gel very easily. But what's different about the way and manner that we do things is that we understand that the change we want to see may not necessarily be what is in black and white. And when we look at the screen, you sort of see multiple sort of elements that are here. One is where we've got digital technologies in the hands of the child. And added to that is a whole range of manipulatives where the child is able to immerse themselves in both digital technology as well as hands-on technology, as well as their foundational skills that are required. When we look on the part of the teacher and we're looking at how does a teacher sort of move from not necessarily a rut, but their comfort zone of being in a particular sort of position of teaching for the last 20 to 30 years, and how do they now embrace technologies in clever and engaging ways, which is a very difficult task to do when you're working from a point of comfort to now going into the unknown. And when we say age is an issue, and many sort of people would say that, okay, we've got the more senior teachers that are a bit more difficult to get into, the space of engaging technologies. But actually, when you look very creatively, it's not only, and I think age must be understood that it's a state of mind. You could be young in age, but actually old in mind, and therefore not wanting to change and to do things differently. Now, SchoolNet's been around for a good long time, and part of the sort of thinking around digital projects has been, is there first and foremost access to infrastructure? And whilst some of our independent schools and some of our X-Model C types and even, quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools, teachers that have access to infrastructure can be as innovative as their minds imagine. But without that, you are sort of held back from innovating in your context. And I say that with a little note. Digital content as well needs to be sort of formulated within the space. And when we look at ways in which teachers have access to digital content, it's not only about finding things off the net, but it's about creating. And I think Ronald and even Frankie, before we started, was talking about creating this content and ensuring that the South African voice is coming through in terms of the digital content. When we talk about teacher professional development, obviously, if we have digital infrastructure, we have digital content, but actually there's no teacher professional development that guides the thinking around how teachers are meant to be using this, both in terms of administrative tasks, but also more importantly for the teaching and learning change process to happen in the classroom itself. E-administration, we know that the bulk of our teachers are bogged down by administrative tasks. And if we can alleviate that using digital means, then we're already halfway through the battle of striving toward innovation. And connectivity is obviously the
the age-old problem, because connectivity, for those of us that are in spaces where there's broadband, where there's fiber, we don't see connectivity as an issue. But as we go into rural spaces, and not even as rural as you would imagine, you're looking at on the outskirts of Gauteng, you're looking at the outskirts of many sort of areas. Connectivity is a huge issue because there isn't, the points of presence, and it's not possible to connect. So how do we find ways to mediate the learning, knowing that not all of these pieces of the puzzle are in place for many of the schools? And we understand that, public sector schools at this moment in time account for 93% of the schooling in South Africa. So when you start looking at what is the momentous task in terms of creating change and change on the ground, we start looking at what are the key sort of elements that we need to have in place for transforming pedagogy. And when we start looking at it, and I know Lindsay had mentioned that, content knowledge was a passion project, but when we talk about digital and we're talking about pedagogical change, we're saying that there must be a subset of all three bits in balance. There must be technological knowledge where a teacher is able to understand how to work the technologies, but more importantly, how to be savvy enough to understand what are the tools and the apps that one can use to augment the learning process. Then when we talk about pedagogical knowledge, we're saying, what is the art of teaching? How do you get your point across? How do you teach in an engaging and wonderful way? And I think Frankie mentioned some amazing sort of elements around how can you engage the learning in fun ways so that it doesn't seem to be a drain on the learning process. And when we talk about content knowledge, we also know that in many instances, we have circumstances where teachers themselves don't have content knowledge. And it is, where you have a free period, you're a geography qualified teacher, and there's a need for a maths teacher, and suddenly you're teaching maths. And it is the nature of the beast that we call education at the moment, where if you have a free space and you need it, then you do what you need to do. Now, some of the work that SchoolNet does is in terms of trying to observe the change on the ground. And we said, to be the change you want to see. And when we do teacher professional development, then all our sort of work is to try and see how best can we see that change, because the proof in the pudding and the success measures for us is to see what kind of change, because yes, the teacher comes to a training session, they learn and they say, oh, how wonderful it is, and hoping for a certificate. But actually, when you start doing portfolios of evidence, when you start showcasing your activities, you're showcasing that you have learned some skills, you've built some competencies, and then you are setting the stage for a change in the classroom. Then when you go back, it's very easy to get bogged down by the nature of life, the nature of school, back to your day job. And so what we try to see is, how does a teacher now showcase that change? And those of you that know SchoolNet will know that, what we try to do here is to then extract evidence in terms of, okay, teacher, you've learned these skills, you've learned these competencies, so what? Now, what are you doing differently as a result of this training measure? How are you changing the way you've done teaching? And we collect that evidence. And you'll know that, all of SchoolNet's courses are SACE endorsed, which means that there's a SACE CTPD point that is attached to any of the courses that you do. And we only give that SACE endorsement once we've seen a change on the ground. And the key sort of element is to see change on the ground. And you'll see that we start observing that change by saying, okay, well, is there substitution where, typically you just would write on a chalkboard, now you substitute, you're using a smartboard, a more expensive tool, but still essentially the same sort of activity. When you're augmenting the learning, you start saying, okay, so slight changes, okay, where you would typically be looking at a picture in a textbook, you're now seeing the heart pumping in life sciences. When you start modifying the behaviors, you're saying, okay, well, typically you'd write an essay in any of the languages program, but now you're publishing a magazine or you're writing a journal article. And when we're redefining, we start saying, okay, so how do we redefine the whole sort of element that, for example, you collaborate as a team together in an online space. You're able to put together a publication or a book. You're able to put together a blog post, a travel diary. So trying to see how you match blooms in a manner that sees you observing the change that one needs to be having. Now, the foundations of our work, I'll rush, I know that we've got time for questions, but when we start looking at understanding the context from which we are coming, and knowing that actually not all teachers are the same, not all the contexts are the same. So some of you may have, wonderful sort of resources within your classroom, but others may not, where, fundamentally a camera, a smartphone in a classroom is all the innovation that a teacher is going to see. So understanding the context that we're working, and to help the teacher grow from that position, whatever the resources are available, to a higher point and progress in terms of seeing what that looks like. And the skills are learned just in time, but more importantly, when you're measuring success, you are trying to encourage the change in the classroom. And so when you start looking at work in practice, you start saying, okay, so how do you include elements of gamification? How can you use digital tools for assessing? And when you start talking about assessing, there's formative assessment, there's summative assessment, but you are able to use digital tools and applications in clever ways to ignite, but more importantly, to showcase whether the child is learning, in fact, whatever it is that you're teaching. When we're looking at online workshops, you start saying, okay, so you're platform agnostic. Are you Microsoft? Are you Google? It doesn't matter. Whatever the teacher is meant to be able to do, whatever fits their purpose, we help and guide what that looks like. When we start looking at one-on-one coaching, so where people are struggling in terms of digital, and we've seen this firsthand, primarily SchoolNet's work has been centered around face-to-face training, because the bulk of our public sector schools are in need of novice beginner sort of teaching, where we guide the teacher into using technologies, but using technologies in purposeful ways for teaching the content they're meant to be getting through. But where teachers are struggling in this space is we now move to an online position. But actually, when you start looking at whether the teachers are savvy enough to even get onto the platform, we're having huge difficulties in terms of how do they hook up to a platform? How do they manage that sort of process of understanding how to navigate the platform, in addition to looking at what are the changing contexts and the content that's available. So one-on-one coaching and mentoring is important. I won't talk about the other sort of elements. I think it's important that we start talking about the questions that is there. But typically you would understand that, SchoolNet doesn't charge fees for any of the trainings that we do, but we do have corporate social responsibilities, and we have, CSI funding that basically pays for us to deliver workshops, and we work nationally. So I'll leave it for there, and hopefully there will be questions that you'd like to know.
Thanks, Omashani. That's really insightful in terms of how you're actually looking at the teachers. So we've had different points of view in terms of how we're looking at staff. And if I'm listening to what most of you are saying this evening, it's focusing on the teachers. So the mindset of the teacher, Francois was talking about the financing of the school and the impact that has on the teacher. Ronald and Michelle, you were also talking about the teacher and the growth. And TC, you spoke about that in terms of your school's philosophy. And so I think if we could quickly go around and do a round robin, and if you could actually say, for you, what is the nugget in terms of, if you had to say in one sentence, what is it in terms of teachers that you think is the most important in terms of professional development, growth, or changing the education system? Why do you see the teacher as the key? So, Francois, if you'd like to begin.
So thanks for that. If we look at teachers, what is the most important? It's very difficult to try and prioritize it, but what I would say is that teachers know their context, they know their classrooms, they know their learners, and that by far is the most important thing. Let's trust our teachers. Let's give our teachers the autonomy. They are professionals after all. Let teachers, give them freedom to express the curriculum, the content, the skills, the values in the way that they best deem fit for their learners. When teachers learn from each other, when we move out of the island of the classroom and we collaborate, we learn from each other, and we apply that to our unique context, that is a super teacher in my opinion.
Thank you. That's really cool. Mish, what do you think?
So I think what's really, really important is that we don't use technology's sake with our teachers. And for change management, we need to our teachers really need to understand the role that technology plays in the learning outcomes. And I think there is no longer a debate of whether we should or shouldn't use technology. I think, Corin, we were at conferences like 10 years ago with that debate. Now it's like how we use it and in which context and which way we use it. And I think it's our role to make sure that teachers understand how the benefits for the child, for the teaching process, and for the school, and to focus on the learning outcomes as opposed to the technology. And I think that's really important.
Thank you. Ronald. Your sound's gone again.
So for me, Karen, it's two things that needs to go together. It's empowering yourself and attitudes, because those two things is the best recipe for you to change any environment you engage in, whether it's in the school context, whether it's in a local spa or local whatever. Your attitude determines how you get in and out of a situation, and what you leave behind is also determined by attitude. So attitudes, and your attitude towards the technology, attitude towards learners, your attitude towards the department you're working for, your attitude towards people coming in and showing their products. It's an attitude thing. So it's about attitude that will leave a lasting legacy. So for me, my final thoughts on any teacher's empowerment is an attitude. If you get up in the morning and you remind yourself of what you want to achieve today, it needs to be guided by a certain attitude and certain values. And I think that's important. And we need to become a value-driven society so that we can respect each other, not based on what your qualifications are, not based on where you are teaching. I'm teaching in the rural school, but I can tell you now, I'm doing world-stage stuff that will empower other people. And that's for me, my attitude that is determined that. And I appreciate the fact that I can share this with others.
Thanks, Ronald. TC.
Thanks. I think more and more we're realizing, particularly this year, that teachers are probably the most valuable asset that we have in the schooling system. And so if I think about other professions, there's just such a call for greater investment in employee well-being. And it's interesting that in the education space, there isn't much talk of that. You know, a lot of what we imagine is that what would fix education would be higher pay. And you find out from a lot of corporates who've got really strong organizational culture, it actually has got very little to do with pay. I think Michelle alluded to it a little bit. It's around creating autonomy and professional development and trusting that people are professional enough to know, as content experts, what it is that they're supposed to be teaching their students. I say this one in my role as global culture manager, but also as a former maths teacher. I know for sure that often it was a case of, oh, this is the newest wave, or this is the newest technology, and so we think you should ride that wave. But many a times teachers have had tried and tested methods of implementing education. What we need to do is support teachers with better technologies to be able to take those methods and improve, as opposed to constantly reinventing an old wheel. And so, yeah, I think the investment in the well-being of teachers is incredibly important, particularly time. And definitely that comes from greater professional development, more autonomy, and really positioning teachers as professionals, because that's truly what we are.
Can I just build on what TC saying, Corin, if that's okay?
Yes, sure. And then Omashani. Yeah.
I just want to say that what TC was saying about culture and leadership, I think it's also about making sure that the buy-in is, you can't expect our teachers to change when there's no systematic buy-in. And I think that's what's really important, is what are the non-negotiables within that culture. So, I mean, in an organizational culture, is like there's certain non-negotiables in where you use tech, and certain non-negotiables, and from director to, and I think often we work with schools that the leaders aren't interested in that technology integration, and the champions are the ones who've given that role. So I think TC's, it's becoming an integrated part of culture is so important, because I think it's what the system demands.
I do agree. Omashani.
All right. So from my point of view, I think, teachers are the key to sustaining our education system, as TC is saying. But for me, it must be the willingness to try new things and to try new things within the context of which you are operating. And I think the key sort of element for us is public sector schools generally. When you start looking at the majority of our kids come out of school without experience or expertise in digital. And part of the issues that we're having at the moment is that we're saying that our babies need to come out of schooling with skills for the job place or skills for higher ed, but we're not doing enough within the basic education to ensure that this is happening. And teachers are the custodian and the key to that development and change. And I think this is where a teacher is able to be that change and to be willing to be that agent of change so that they themselves can model that kind of behavior for the children themselves. So yeah.
I think also, sorry, one last thing, and then I think also we've also chatted about, and I think everyone on the panel agree, we've chatted about how education needs to change, and I think, and there's a lot of discussion about what that means for the role of the teacher, and we need to all be very clear on that in terms of the change management process. What does it actually mean? How is the role of the teacher going to change in this new order?
I think you're right, Mishi. So, part of the sort of, there's many sort of people that keep saying that, okay, well, computers are going to take over and teachers are going to lose their jobs left, right, and center. But education is social. The fact that it is social means that there must be a social dialogue in the education process, because otherwise there's a huge piece of the puzzle that's missing. So if we work within that context, we then understand that the role of the teacher is key, but however that role may change based on the manner in which we do education henceforward. But, when you talk about education reform or curriculum reform, South Africa is the only one in the world, let's say. I mean, we've gone through 4 curriculum reforms since 1994. 4. And when you start looking at curriculum change and people sort of looking at what are the ways in which we can change and tweak the current sort of space that we're in at the moment, we're looking at how do you build in entrepreneurship, how do you build in sort of employability skills, how do you build in the life skills, the essential life skills, not even soft skills, they're not soft skills, they are downright essential skills in terms of how do we create human beings that come out of the system as strong, standing tall and being confident enough to engage in a social environment. And that is key to building citizenship and to building, productive, economically savvy and active individuals in this environment.
So now that I'm back again, sorry, but I really think that how we actually engage in the staff room is really important. So it starts for me, the change starts in the classroom and the staff environment, and it then goes out into how you actually engage in your classroom. If you are comfortable within your school space and you feel comfortable that you can explore ideas and express views, people are then happy to go and do that. And often if you've got a happy staff room, you've got happy children in classrooms, because the teachers, that permeates and then goes out into the school. So TC, do you want to say something, or are you just saying you agree?
Sorry, that's the Novo Pioneer sign for agree. Absolutely agree with that statement.
Okay. So I do think that the technology is there, and if we use it just for the sake of using it, like you guys were saying, it doesn't make any sense. It's how do we use it in a meaningful manner? That for me, it's not the icing on top of the cake. It's part of the cake if you're going to use it. And so really, how do you engage with the technology and with the way you teach, and how are you engaging with your children? What the studies are showing is how the children have really taken strain in lots of ways from the social distancing, but so have the teachers. So the teachers, from their own socialization, where you're able to discuss a child quickly in a staff room if you need some help, those little bits of nuggets have also been lost. And so how do we, in this crazy space that we're in now, both support the teachers and the students is something that schools really need to consider. I don't know if anybody's got some thoughts as we end off. If you'd all like to go around and just give a final comment. So Francois, if you'd like to begin.
If I can just add on to what you said there, when it comes down to supporting, there's a little anecdote that I absolutely love. You know, when you're on an airplane, well, those of you that can remember the time back in the old days when we still flew around, just during the safety talk, there would be this section that the stewardess would say, you know, if for some reason there would be decompression, you'd see these oxygen masks drop from above. Before you put the oxygen mask on anybody else, on your child, they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Now, that sounds extremely selfish because, I mean, you can save someone else. But the point being, if you don't look after yourself, if you pass out, there's no way that you can assist anybody else. When it comes to support, teachers need to look after themselves first. You can't pour from an empty cup. You don't need support from your direct principal, from your direct line manager, or your direct colleagues. We are in a globalized world. There are networks of teachers, professional learning networks. There are communities of practice where other super teachers are doing amazing work. I'm looking at the rest of my panelists. They're doing amazing work. Take hands from these people, and you will prosper. There's no way that you'll fail excessively if you rely on your colleagues.
Thank you. Mish?
Yeah, I just want to say that over the last 5 months, I've seen amazing creativity, amazing compassion, amazing empathy, amazing collaboration from teachers. And teachers have really showed up. They've had to not only be teachers, they've had to be videographers, they've had to be parents, they've had to be, I mean, it's just, I really say, like, well done. And I think as we move forward, I think we must just remember what we've been through, remember how much we've achieved, and it's an exciting time to be alive. It's an exciting time to learn. And I think just the community, Karen, that you've established today and everything, I think let's move forward together, supporting each other, and use technology to empower ourselves and to empower our students and to empower our country. And there's amazing opportunities for all of us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ronald?
Yeah, I think at the end of the Karen in the rest of the panel, I think there's a lot out there for teachers to do whatever they need to do to change their teaching and learning environments. And I mean, the collaboration that I did with my Facebook group, the majority of the people, I've never seen them. I've never met them personally. And but it just shows that with the right attitude, if you can connect with the right people that will navigate you and take you by your hand and show you the ways how you can improve yourselves and how you can improve your attitude towards things, which obviously requires a level of some emotional intelligence, because that's also something that was touched on earlier on with some of the other presenters, emotional intelligence, stuff like that. So I think we as teachers at the end of the day, and I need to say this subtly because the reality for teaching and what the perception is two total different things. And because the reality of teaching within schools right now, as I'm speaking, is that it's every day it's changing because our curriculum is not disaster proof. And it may be something that also needs to be looked at on a national level, because our curriculum is disaster proof. What if something happens again? What if tsunami comes? Our curriculum is not disaster proof. Our curriculum is too rigid and it's too content driven. And we are focusing less on the creativity because the world out there don't need these content beings being pushed out into a system. The world needs creative people, producers, entrepreneurs that can be the driving change. We have a lot of people here. Look at Super Teacher, Lindsay, all those people who are entrepreneurial in the sense of what they are doing today, and all the other people doing what they're also doing. But the reality is that we need to be allowed to get a little bit of more creative room to play around so we can mold our kids. I mean, if you the latest thing from Google is that they are looking to empower people and they would like to replace professional development and higher education is having a problem with that, because now what Google says, you don't need a 4-year certificate to become a coder. You can do a few courses and you can do coding. And these are the changes that we as teachers need to become aware of, so that we can also become the driving force behind these things. Because remember, some kids in your classroom, I had a child in my classroom of 5-6 years back. I asked him, what does he want to become one day? He said he wants to become a taxi driver, taxi owner. He has taxis, he is a taxi driver, and is driving a better car than me. But the education system doesn't prepare him to become a taxi driver or taxi owner. I had a child who said he wanted to become a fisherman. The school, yes, maritime studies is becoming a component in certain schools now, but the schooling system is not preparing our kids in terms of what their skill set are. And I know it's not realistic to prepare everybody for the world out there, but we need to be realistic that when you put a fish and you take an ape, and you take a donkey, you take a bird, and you tell them, climb that tree, we know for a fact it's going to win. The monkey is going to win the race. We ask them to swim in the river, we know for a fact the fish is going to win the race. So these are the unequal things that we have in our society, and serious addressing. And at the end of the day, because we are just teaching content and we are disregarding the emotions of these kids. But nevertheless, I want to leave it there. And it was great talking to this panel. And I hope going forward that we can engage more. Omashani, you spoke about feedback and Shemo. I'm going to talk to you later all about that.
Cool.
TC and Omashani, sorry, you got a little bit of time.
Okay, great. I'll kick us off. I just want to make mention of just how excited I am for the prospect of teaching and learning in our country, with some of the people that I was able to share the panel with today, and as well as the many teachers who've joined, and we can see from the comment section. And just to make mention of the fact that, a true test of how equipped a school is in terms of a culture point of view, none other than a global pandemic. Two of our culture principles that I want to speak to now is one called Solutions First, which is what I'm seeing here right now, is a lot of teachers have just had to creatively think about ways in which they can continue to engage their learners and continue to deliver the curriculum. And our second culture principle that comes to mind as we're here together is Greater Together, right? And so in our ability to collaborate and come together and think together, we're acting as one team, and thereby progressing the country and a whole generation of students along an incredibly difficult year. So thank you to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be a member of this panel.
From my side, okay. From my side, I think there's just a willingness to pursue professional growth, and I think the more widely read, widely sort of just soaking in all of the new developments. And I'm not saying we must be trend huggers or any of those things, but to be widely read means that you're able to be discerning about what works for you, what doesn't work for you, but more importantly, ways in which you can try exciting things. And I think one of the comments from Aisha is saying that, you're under pressure to complete the curriculum. Absolutely, because we've now got this mentality that we checklisting teaching. Whether the child's understood the thing is irrelevant. It's just, okay, have you completed the work? So, and I think we need to get away from that kind of thing, but we need to be creative about how we do that while still meeting the basic sort of checklist elements, but trying to be as creative within the framework that we're in. Whilst COVID has provided the space for us to pause a little bit, it hasn't given us sufficient time for us to reinvent what it is we wanting to do, how we wanting to achieve that. And most importantly, how do we create a curriculum that is rich enough to create a savvy individual, a savvy adult who's able to live in this world as a global citizen. And I think that's going to be key for us in terms of our change going forward.
So I just want to say to each and every one of you, thank you so much for sharing. I really value your input. Thank you for contributing to this discussion. Let's take these discussions forward, as some of you have suggested, and really thank you for your time and your input. I really appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you all. Thanks,
Perfect.
See you soon.
Karen.